Hello, my name is Meridian Grace. I'm a naturopath, homeopath, and longtime student of alternative medicine and healing methods. Actually, I realized that it all started for me at 14, which is more than 50 years ago, when I began working in health food stores and health food restaurants, and then spent a few years backpacking in the woods, studying natural ways of healing through plants, things of that nature. Living a little bit with Aboriginal folks, and then came more of the more classical kinds of trainings. My life has been dedicated to this work, and it's been such a privilege to get to know many of you through the years with different health issues, because we bring a whole new, exciting way of considering what we can do to support ourselves in being healthy. You know, I said an all new, but when I think about it, it's really quite old. Because I'm talking to you today, and hopefully all the time, about the wisdom of our own bodies, the way our bodies know how to heal themselves, the way nature and humans can interact in a totally supportive and beautiful way that encourages our way of, and encourages health, quality of life, well-being. And even when we have the scariest of diagnoses come to us, if we learn to look at what's truly there and start to ask inner questions and explore deeply and not just accept everything you hear, including what I'm saying to you, we can find truly extraordinary answers. So our bodies are all about continuing to survive in as healthy a way as humanly possible. And it appears that as humans, we've been doing everything in our power to make it difficult for these beautiful forms, our amazing bodies, to continue to thrive and to live well. So today, I received a phone call this morning about a woman who was concerned for her husband with prostate cancer. And she asked me if I would do what the doctors suggested, which was radiation therapy. She should suggest that to her husband and encourage him to do that. Well, it's really wonderful that the two of them have in the past worked with my beloved Dr. Richard Massey, a brilliant alternative medical doctor with a history in anesthesiology and pharmacology. And they have embraced more of a natural way of living. And so they're open-minded to explore the possibilities. Now, of course, I could never tell anyone what they should do. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I also am not involved with diagnoses. But my focus is on how do we support our bodies in being as strong and healthy as they can, and understanding cancer perhaps from a different perspective. About 30 years ago, I had colon cancer, and I treated myself naturally through the work of Dr. Donald Kelly, carried out by by William Walcott, who developed something called metabolic typing. He worked with Dr. Kelly for many years with the patients that Dr. Kelly had challenges with. And through an open mind and great capacity for drawing information in and integrating it, and also exploring how the people that came to him did, he found ways to fine-tune the Kelly program and to support people who were the rare ones that weren't getting well on the program to actually get well. And it has to do with honoring our uniqueness, our biochemical individuality. And that's like one of the unique things about the metabolic typing work, which I've had the privilege of working with for over 30 years now. But, and Dr. Kelly's work, which is its foundation. But the thing that I'd like to tell you is that we have really lost perspective of how our bodies function. And we've just accepted what we've received from science, and the majority of that science is being funded by pharmaceutical companies who have at their underlying purpose making money for their businesses, which involve medications and things that are not necessarily from nature. We're going to be talking about things like the sunlight and how the sunlight is a very direct source of energy for everything in life. That these forms are just light that has been slowed down. And there's amazing science from all over the world that's exploring the qualities of light and healing. And the profound importance of our experience daily of the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun, and getting real natural light. Now, I'm not getting natural light right now because I'm sitting in front of a computer, and so I'm wearing what's called blue blockers to block the unnatural blue light that's coming from my computer. And I'm also using something called Iris, which is a software that helps to reduce the blue light negative impact on my eyes and my human form. Typically, during the day, I tend to cover my body, or when I'm in the blue light, I tend to cover my body up. But when I'm outdoors and I'm getting real native light, real nourishment, the way it was meant to come to me from the sun, I tend to wear as little as I can get away with, which is typically a bikini out in the backyard doing what I'm doing. So I'd like to encourage all of you who are looking for ways to help become stronger and healthier to prevent cancer, or if you actually have a cancer diagnosis, to look at spending time in the sun and also look at the counter science that has showed us that sun is not the cause of melanomas and sun cancers. In fact, that's really a misnomer all over the place. That sun is our nourishment. It feeds us through with the chiasmic centers in the eyes, and that allows for the light to enter into our brain and affect our organs and all of our cells, and it's just quite amazing what it all does. There's a very profound relationship between the brain and all the tissues of the body, but especially with the intestines and the whole gut and digestive part of the body. And we'll get into talking about that sometime soon. But today, what I'd like to do is talk to you about why pancreatic enzymes are nature's way. It's really interesting to talk about it as a pancreatic enzyme, because in nature, in olden days, it would have been actually eating the pancreas of animals. But in this case, pancreatic enzymes are a profound way to support the body in stopping the cancer process. And the work that was done on this was by a Dr. Beard. And Dr. Beard was one of those totally committed scientists, brilliant minds, someone who really took the time to question and to look at unique awarenesses through observation, but not just a single observation. We're talking years of sitting in front of a microscope and looking at the embryonic process, because we're seeing that cancer is a direct link to the origins of life, to the birth process itself. And in a way, when we have a tumor form of cancer, an endothelial form of cancer, we have a cancer that begins just like a new life does. When we have a sperm cell and an egg, an ovum, that come together, there is a connection that happens where we form something called a trophocyte cell. And that trophocyte cell finds its way up into the upper part of the uterus And there it implants. And the way that it does that is by releasing pancreatic enzymes into the tissue, and it eats away and allows for the trophocyte to find its home in the upper part of the uterus. And there's a process that happens with the trophocyte where it begins with these 2 cells, and then it goes to 4, and then 8, and then 16, and on it goes into its development. And during its process of growing, the trophocyte we might call today a stem cell. And these are undifferentiated cells that can form into any organ or tissue. And during this time of the beginning of this trophocyte process, these trophocytes or stem cells are entering into the entire beginning of this life. And the trophocyte creates kind of like a shell type of a form. And into that, the trophocyte actually almost like impels a spore. And that spore is the beginning of the embryo itself. We begin with the trophocyte, which comes from really more from the male sperm. And the spore, which is actually a non-sexual substance, is released into that trophocyte, and then it creates the embryo itself. And the embryo is then nourished by a process called angiogenesis, where nourishment from the blood enters into that tissue and starts to grow. And that tissue would continue to grow and become a cancer if at day 59, or somewhere between the 7th week and the 8th week after the implantation, that the little embryo begins to produce pancreatic enzymes. And the pancreatic enzymes kill that trophocyte that's going crazy. The continuation of all these cells multiplying faster and faster and faster ends with the release of this pancreatic enzyme. Now, John Beard did hundreds of thousands of slides looking at tiny mammalian animals and their release of pancreatic enzymes, killing the trophocyte and beginning the process of life. And when that didn't happen, a very fast-growing form of cancer happens. So we either have the beginning of a new life and a beautiful new body, or we have the beginning of a cancer. And it's the exact same image under a microscope of a trophocyte forming a new life or the cancer stem cells. Now, the interesting thing is that Dr. Beard started out by using pancreatic enzymes that were put together by a pharmacy. I even have the name here somewhere. And it's by Fairchild, a company called Fairchild. And they created an injectable form of pancreatic enzyme in 1902. And he first of all, of course, tested this on animals. And then one of the first humans that he worked with was an army captain who had a laryngeal cancer. And just with the injections of pancreatic enzymes, the laryngeal cancer completely fell off. And there were hundreds of metastatic cancers, in other words, cancers that were not just a first cancer that had spread in the body, and that the doctors felt like there was nothing that they could do, where they were injected with pancreatic enzymes and the cancers just fell off. And interestingly enough, the doctors and researchers didn't believe what he had to say. They booed him away. They didn't accept his research. And there were very few people that picked it up. And 40 years later, when the research was done again, it was discovered that this actually worked. Well, the beginning of the story about cancer, for the work that I've done, began with Dr. Kelly, who was a very well-known researcher, well, actually a very well-known dentist and orthodontist, and was very wealthy. He came up with a number of specific ways of doing orthodontia work, and people had great success with that. And some of those methods are still being used now. And he had adopted a number of children. And when he was in his 30s, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was very severe at the time that they discovered it. They told him to go home and write a will. And he just wasn't willing to let go of those children. And so he started to look into what it would take to bring about a natural cure for himself with cancer. And he had already become very interested in nutrition because he saw that children who came to see him with terrible, misshapen teeth were the offspring of grandparents who had beautiful, strong, healthy teeth and didn't even have any fillings or cavities. And he noticed that the children who he was working with were eating junk food, and the grandparents and great-grandparents were simple ranchers and farmers and eating real food. They were out hunting and fishing and possibly having a garden, but they weren't eating Tootsie Rolls and drinking soda pops and eating, bagged and bagged treats like potato chips and things like that. They were eating real food. And so he started to explore that deeply with himself. And he had some challenging things that actually worked to his advantage. He had a very large protruding tumor. And so he started working with himself, looking at if the tumor would change based on the way that he was eating. And when he ate certain foods, his tumor would get bigger. And when he ate other foods, his tumor would get smaller. So that was one of the places that he began. And he saw that he was making headway, but he wanted to make more. And so he did a bunch of research. And he actually found a book that was written in 1911 by Dr. Beard called Enzyme Treatment of Cancer. And he read this book and was very excited about it. And he couldn't get his hands on any injectable forms of pancreatic enzymes, but he started working with taking oral pancreatic enzymes. And he saw that his tumor was getting smaller. But at one point, he started to feel horribly ill. And he discovered something new. As tumor cells break down and die, they are extremely toxic and hard for the body to clear the toxins. And so he looked a little further and he discovered coffee enemas. And there is some very fascinating information about how a specific chemical in coffee, when it's given through an enema, causes the release of bile, which supports the cleansing of the liver. And so he found that he could take more and more enzymes, the tumor would get smaller and smaller, and he wouldn't be sick as long as he did a coffee enema. And whenever he started to feel bad, he would do an extra coffee enema. So he was doing 1 to 2 coffee enemas a day, and sometimes a third if he started to have discomfort from the detox. And that, in basic, is the foundation of his program. The thing that he also discovered is that we're all unique and different, and so he looked at biochemical individuality. And Dr. Kelly began by just looking at the autonomic nervous system, which is a profound way to look at our biochemical individuality, at whether we're more sympathetic or more parasympathetic, or balanced between the two. The sympathetic is our more fight or flight kind of energy. It's more acidic. It tends to be the people who prefer to be eating lighter foods, more vegetarian, eggs, dairy products for protein, light forms of fish, white forms of chicken, the lighter, easier foods seemingly to digest. Because the sympathetic nervous system is focused so much on fight or flight, running away, moving forward, and the energy is going more to the brain, but not to the digestive system, more to the muscles than to the slowing down and healing and balancing of the body. The parasympathetic nervous system tends to need more proteins, more heavier duty fats, like our animal fats, and not so much of the fruits and vegetables and things of that nature. And so basically, the parasympathetic nervous system is more the more creative side of the brain, the part of the body that deals with digestion and with healing and relaxation and thinking deeply and much more caring rather than focused on getting a job done and getting out of there and fast and go, 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 which is more the sympathetic. And there are many people that fall far more towards balanced, or maybe a little bit from the balanced side to the sympathetic side, or a little bit to the parasympathetic side. So we have different nutrients that we need as sympathetic dominance, and we have other nutrients for parasympathetic dominance. Well, Dr. Kelly's partner, the brilliant Bill Walcott, was charged with trying to help people that didn't fit into those two categories, to see if he could help them to get well when they had cancer. And he started looking into the brilliant work of a Dr. Williams that had to do with the oxidative system and how fast or how slow we burn our carbohydrates. And what he found is that we're either dominated by the oxidative system or the autonomic nervous system. And then in many parts of the world, there was biochemical individuality looked at, like in India, through the doshas. And so he started to put together the wisdom of the world and the different ways that we consider the needs that people have. And so the metabolic typing took all these things into consideration. We were able to fine-tune even further. So we look at eating foods that really nurture us. There's some brilliant work that was done about how sugars and carbohydrates are the primary foods that feed these cancer cells. And so what we've discovered as well is by fine-tuning this process, by knocking out unnatural forms of carbohydrates and sugars and eating more of our high nutrient dense vegetables for our carbohydrates, and not eating grains or sugars or pasteurized forms of dairy, only grass-fed raw forms of dairy, we were able to find the most nutritious way to support the body. We also, when we're dealing with cancer, have people do 2 coffee enemas a day. And I'll get into having a much more deep discussion with you about specific ways that we do coffee enemas and things that we can do to make our enemas more effective another day. But I just wanted to give you an idea of a few of, I think, the most important things when it comes to a diagnosis of cancer. The first one is, over time, you're going to be realizing, as we work with my beloved Dr. Massey, the brilliant work of called German New Medicine and Recall Healing, that looks at how everything that happens, like for instance, a prostate cancer or a breast cancer, in both instances, in a prostate cancer, the body is trying to produce really powerful testosterone and really a strong sperm to make up for a loss, perhaps of a child, a grandchild, or a business, or something that one cares for like a child. For a woman, when she's diagnosed with breast cancer, her breast is actually producing super milk to help to create a healthy baby, because some baby in her life, be it an actual child, or a business that's like a child to her, or an animal, or something that's precious and dear to her is gone, and so she's going to make super milk so she can super nurture that child. And if we can get the support of that trophocyte to do what it's supposed to, which is to stop its excessive growing through some supportive pancreatic enzymes, or interestingly enough, if we can get to the real emotional cause, we'll see that the continuation of these stem cells going crazy, trying to produce a stronger breast or a stronger prostate, will stop, and the body no longer feels a need to have that to happen, and we'll see that the cancer is gone, and the lesson has been learned, which is, I believe, the ultimate purpose. So it's another way of looking at cancer, and when we look at cancer in that way, we're no longer filling ourselves with fear and stress. And there are numerous studies that indicate that the stress and the fear that we have when we get a diagnosis like this is probably the most detrimental thing that happens to us, to actually make it more difficult for the body to bring about the healing. So coming from a really positive attitude and looking at how we can use this experience to maybe find our way back to nature, to spend time in the sun, to stay away as much as possible from EMFs, to protect ourselves with our blue blockers, to try to get up with the sun and go to bed with the sun, to do loving, creative, playful things in your life so that you have a positive attitude, to do some self-exploration in a kind and gentle way with yourself, to consider and look at the brilliant, interesting work of the metaphors of every part of our body and what it's trying to communicate to us through recall healing, and to find our way into natural forms of foods that are in tune with nature. Like for instance, during the summer, there are more forms naturally of fruits and berries and things like that growing. And there aren't if you live in cold climates in the winter, where it makes a lot more sense for us to be eating high proteins and fats that are supportive to our personal body type, and eating more of a ketogenic oriented diet during the winter. So we follow what nature is showing us. Like for instance, in Chinese medicine, we are now in the part of the year that's considered the time of the metal element.